Chapter 8. Kivasa sat patiently on a short, padded stool, 9 feet from the force field barrier at the entrance of Cyanide's hidden cavern. There was a folding camp chair resting against the back wall next to her. She suspected the stool was normally used as a footrest, but hadn't bothered to ask. A narrow fissure in the wall flickered periodically with dim orange light. She could hear the gentle trickle of water nearby, most likely from one of the streams that traced down the side of the cliff outside. "I hate to ask," Kivasa said through the gap in the wall, "but shouldn't we do something about my Shadow Brigade escort?" "I've got it covered," Cyan said from somewhere beyond the crack. "I sent my defender to deal with him a while ago." "When did you do that?" "Just before I jumped." Cyan's laughter flowed into the room. "What would you have done if I didn't follow you, and why do you need a defender?" "The comm system we use is a telepathic relay built into my sports bra." I would have just cancelled the order. It would have irritated him, probably, but it is his job to put up with my idiosyncrasies. Defenders are just subterrans who have pledged their lives to serve the noble houses. Their families are well compensated, but they tend not to live too long. Why not? And that still doesn't answer why someone as competent as you would need someone to defend you. We call them guardians or defenders, but that's not really the job. Regardless of what other duties they're given, their most vital task is the one that tends to be their cause of death. Cyan paused for a moment before continuing. They're emergency soul stones. Seriously, Kivasa gasped, and they're okay with that? It's the job, Cyan explained. They're usually Shamfarians who have all these notions of noble sacrifice baked into their culture. I really don't get it, personally. It is what it is. My Udbar helper is a special case. He and I have come to an agreement. He takes care of my leech while I'm off on assignments. I only bring him along when I need to be in too many places at the same time. Beyond that, he's more like a butler than anything else. It works out well for him, too. I got him out of a... What do Terrans call them? A pound? No. That's for pets. Oh well, it will come to me. While he's registered as my defender, he's immune to prosecution, so he doesn't have to worry about being sent back to... Cyan trailed off, snapping her fingers as if she expected the word to appear before her. Prison? Kivasa asked. Yeah. That's it. I'm starting to understand why people are so critical of Lamentic morality, Kivasa muttered. I'm sorry, Cyan said. Speak up a little. I couldn't make out what you were saying. How do Lamentics deal with their criminals? Kivasa asked. Do you have anything like prisons? No, Cyan said while making grunting noises. We're much harsher than that. Do you need help in there? I'm just having a little problem replacing a power cell. It's jammed, but I've almost got it. Sorry, where was I? Oh yeah. Capital offenses against the High Court are punishable by death, but most crimes are dealt with at Yarrows. A restaurant. You make your criminals work as waitstaff? I know, Cyanide said as a loud pop sounded through the fissure. It's barbaric, but it can be hard to break with tradition. Kivasa sat silently staring at the flickering light filtering through the crack. I'm really sorry this is taking so long, Cyan said. I swear, I'm almost done. I don't come here that often, so I didn't know one of the old cells was dead. It's fine, Kivasa replied just as she heard the sound of something metallic skipping across the floor deeper in the cavern. Any more questions? Cyan asked. Save the fun ones for when I'm done with this, okay? Have you and your defender ever? Cyan laughed. You're kidding, right? With an Udbar? That wouldn't be worth it for either of us. Being executed isn't on either of our to-do lists. Why would? I'm one of the unperfected, Cyan said as if it explained everything and then added, well, that and he prefers the company of men. He did tell me he thought your pet Terran was cute, for what it's worth. Granted, it might have been sarcasm. So, he prefers men like you prefer women, Kivaza said. A faint humming noise reverberated through the walls. I've got it, Cyan said triumphantly. I'll be right there. Oh, and what makes you think I prefer women? Kivaza blinked in confusion. What? Don't get me wrong, Cyan's voice got louder and closer as she spoke. I am attracted to some women, but being one of the unperfected, males aren't an option for me. What? Why? Oh, wait, Cyan said. You don't know about the unperfected, but then again, why would you? It's a lementic breeding program that's been going on for millennia. Unperfected women are only permitted to procreate with unperfected males. Unfortunately, the last unperfected male died about half a century ago. Why haven't they just done away with the program? Kivaza asked as Cyan reached through the crack in the wall. Tradition is important to lementics, Cyan said as she guided Kivaza through the narrow passage. No offense, but that's kinda ridiculous. Tell me about it, Cyan chuckled. If I slept with a male who is not part of the program, we'd both be put to death. So, my options are women, death, or masturbation. Personally, given those choices, I prefer option 1. Just wondering if I used one of my tails to. Kivaza began. Slip through a loophole? You're not male, so no risk of execution, Cyan grinned broadly. So, you're saying you just wanted a piece of tail? Kivaza teased as she slid out of the ravine. The chamber beyond the crack was rounded with a domed ceiling. At first glance, Kivaza thought Cyan had used her mystic talents or some technological device to shape the outer walls. On one side of the chamber, a power generator hummed softly. Electrical cords reached out across the room, leading to small junction boxes which rested in crudely hewn indentations within the floor. The electric lantern she'd lit earlier was resting atop the generator, casting shadows against the smooth reflective walls. Darkened mounds of indeterminate nature were scattered throughout the area. Over here, Cyanide said urgently as she rushed over to one of the boxes. I couldn't find enough good compatible cells, so I can't turn everything on. I had to unplug most of it, and I don't have enough light to know which plug is which, so I'll need your help. I can generate fire, Kivaza remarked. Without heat? No, Kivaza admitted. Last time I tried to just work with light, it didn't end well. That's not an option, Cyan said firmly. I don't want to risk damaging something. Some of the things in here are really flammable. Just flip the breaker when I tell you to, okay? Got it, Kivaza said as she knelt next to the box and held onto the breaker bar. Cyan looked almost ghostly in the lantern light as she rushed over to the generator. Her hair was still tied with a ribbon behind her head. The ponytail was draped over her shoulder as she leaned forward on her knees as she sorted through cables resting on the floor nearby. Kivaza had managed to calm her libido while waiting in the small cave entrance, but all it took was watching Cyan's naked form to rekindle those desires. Did you flip it? Cyan asked. I didn't hear the click. Sorry, Kivaza said as she pulled the switch. Nothing happened. Turn it back off, Cyan said as she disconnected the cord and reached for the next. Click. Cyan plugged in the second cord. Kivaza was momentarily mesmerized by the woman's movements, the rotation of her hips, the subtle movements of her breasts, the shifting of her hair, and the movements of her strong yet slender arms and legs. Again. Click. Just 2 more, Cyan said as she turned to her side, sat with her legs crossed, disconnected the second cord, and carefully examined the remaining 2 cables. They both looked the same. I have no idea. Can't you just use the lantern? Kivaza asked. No, Cyan said forcefully. I spent months setting this all up, and the first time I try to show it off this happens. She plugged in one of the cables. Click. Come on! Cyan roared as she swiftly swapped the plugs again. Click. Stop, Kivaza insisted as Cyan yanked out the cord and stood, panting, looking as if she was about to smash the generator. Let me try something, before you lose it completely. Go ahead, Cyan sighed. I give up. Kivaza narrowed her eyes and readjusted them so she could see the flow of energy throughout the room. Eldarani can perceive the flow of energy? Nax, electricity, any sort of energy, Kivaza explained. How does that help us? Cyan snickered. I have to refocus my eyes to see it, but I think I can find the right cord. Kivaza insisted. She rested her hand on the cord that connected to the junction box, pulled electricity from the air around her and gently pushed a light pulse of electricity through the cable. It's over there, she said as she watched the electricity flow to the end of the line. Cyan walked toward where Kivaza was pointing. A little forward and to the right, Kivaza said. I've got you, Cyanide exclaimed as she picked up the plug and ran back to the generator. Ready. Flip the switch. Gentle white light flooded through the room. Best partner ever, Cyan cheered as she stood up, turned off the lantern, and spun to face her. Warm air began flooding into the room as a ceiling-mounted convection heater sprang into action. Nice, Kivaza said as she rose to her feet. We make a good team. I'll probably be spending all of my free time for the next few days out here getting this place rewired, Cyan said as she approached Kivaza, but it was worth it. The light was emanating from somewhere behind Kivaza. The walls looked polished in some areas and scored in others. The area was nearly 30 feet in diameter. Judging from the markings on the walls and ceiling, this had once been the nesting place of a rather large creature, most likely something serpentine with coarse scales. There were assorted electronic devices strewn throughout the room and piled collections of bone and hide. It was as much a trophy room as a location for quiet meditation. She couldn't help but wonder about the origin and purpose of a dark obelisk near the generator. It's nice, but I wouldn't call it cozy, Kivaza said while trying to sound positive. I can't imagine sleeping here. Cyan smiled playfully, leaned forward at the waist and said, Look behind you. Kivaza turned and saw large round eyes peering at her, and massive open jaws seeming to be grinning at her. 6 legs with massive claws reached out from its central bulk. It had golden fur with dark stripes. Her black tail sped up above her head and extended its stinger. Her twin brown tails moved into position to defend Cyan. Just before she could leap into battle, Cyan grabbed her by her right shoulder and spun her around forcefully. Don't kill the bed, Cyan scolded. What? That's a Flanix skin rug. Calm down, it's already dead. Cyan slowly turned Kivaza to face the newly lit area, took a half step forward, and held her from just behind with their bodies pressed firmly together. Cyan's arms reached around her with her right hand on Kivaza's stomach and her left hand cupping Kivaza's right breast. That's a bed, and there's plenty of padding underneath, Cyan said softly as her hand slowly traced one of Kivaza's markings down her stomach, following a gradually arching curve towards her hip. The woman's warm breath sent a shiver through Kivaza's body as it flowed down her chest. She knew Cyan was taller than her, but hadn't realized how much taller until this moment. It hadn't seemed significant when they were in the water. Most of the difference had to be in the length of their legs. I've never heard of a Flanix with stripes before, Kivaza commented. There are only 2 or 3 striped breeds. I had that hide imported all the way from the Elvran system. What can I say? Elvran Flanix have the second best stripes in all of Corrales, and I'm a sucker for stripes. What has the best? Not what who, Cyan said as she traced where one of Kivaza's stripes ran under her breast, tapering to a point as it neared the center of her chest. What makes mine the best? Kivaza asked with a note of cynicism. They're two-tone, Cyan whispered as she moved her fingers to the slender light brown stripe that looked like it ran underneath her darker marks, as if it was a shadow cast on her skin. Why are you so fascinated with stripes? My people don't have any skin pigment. Cyan's breasts moved against Kivaza's back slightly as she spoke. It's all the same. We're like a blank canvas. I've always been intrigued by beings with interesting markings, spots, stripes, and even tattoos. I'd love to get one, a tattoo that is. I'm unperfected. More stupid rules? Tradition, Cyan said in a voice full of sorrow. We're not allowed any form of body modification. Some of the perfected have refused to have wounds tended to properly, so it leaves a scar. What would be the punishment if you did get a tattoo? Death. Really? What about scars? Have you ever considered? No. I'm an agent of the High Court, so I don't even have that option. Lamentic laws are bizarre, Kivaza said in frustration. They seem to be all about keeping up appearances. Let me guess, leaving your post with the High Court would be punishable by death, or is that a waitstaff offense? It would damage my family's ranking within Lamentic society. Kivaza giggled softly as Cyan lightly traced a slender strip of fur which flowed from where her black tail connected to her spine, up over her hip, and down toward her pelvis. Did that tickle? No, Kivaza said while trying not to laugh. Then what? Waitress or death? Worst game show ever. Kivaza leaned forward slightly and burst out laughing. Cyan's grip tightened desperately around her, yanking Kivaza's pelvis back further with her fingers locked in a fist, tightly gripping the triangular patch of fur between Kivaza's thighs as she moaned loudly, and gasped a word Kivaza didn't know. Kivaza yelped. That hurts, you're pulling my hair. I mean fur. Sorry, Cyan whimpered. It felt like all of the muscles in her body had locked up completely. Kivaza positioned her thumb and forefinger on either side of Cyan's forearm and pushed firmly until her hand unclenched. You really don't have much feeling in your tails, Cyan gasped. Once the pain had subsided, Kivaza stood completely still trying to understand a different sensation. One of Cyan's hands was on her abdomen. Her other arm was wrapped around her waist with her hand gripping Kivaza's side. It felt like two fingers were gently resting on either side of the base of her black tail, right where it connected to her spine, propped up slightly by the base of each of her brown tails. It was an odd sensation, slightly warm pressure and a little dampness. No, not much, Kivaza answered while trying to remain completely still. I can feel heat, cold, hard, smooth, wet, dry, and pressure, but not much else. So then, is my tail? Kivaza asked as she twitched her black tail. Cyan gasped and moaned softly, oh, yeah. Kivaza closed her eyes and shifted her weight back, leaning further into Cyanide's embrace. A soft shuddering breath escaped Cyan's lips as Kivaza's heels slowly lowered toward the floor. As Kivaza attempted to rise back up onto the balls of her feet, Cyan grabbed onto the top of her hips, shoved her back down and took a swift step back. That's enough, Cyan barked as she swatted Kivaza's black tail away, which seemed determined to finish what it had started. I thought you wanted. Kivaza said in confusion as she turned to face her partner. That's not what I want, Cyan panted. Well, I do want it, but on my terms. Your terms? Get your tails under control, and I'll try to explain. Kivaza began to coil her tails around her, but then stopped as she saw the disapproving look on Cyan's face. She scolded herself silently for covering the stripes on her legs and unfurled her tails. There's an old expression, Cyan said. Tejmare today, gone tomorrow. I do want you to be my Tejmare, and I want to be yours, but not for today. Kivaza was confused. It's been a long time since I've been intimate with anyone, Cyan said, chuckling softly. You were able to keep pace with me, you kept up with my flirting, and you even jumped off a cliff for me. Why? Just because you wanted to roll around for a night? I hope not. I have an idea, Cyan said as she reached up to untie the ribbon in her hair. We can use this. Kivaza grabbed her tails at the base of her spine and ran her hand down their length until she held the tips of all three tightly together. I want for us to be partners and one another's Tejmare, Cyan said insistently. Cyan carefully tied Kivaza's tails together just below their tips. I'd like that, too, Kivaza whispered breathlessly as her heart pounded within her chest. Deep within her mind she could hear Kayla screaming objections. She's loud, Cyan snickered. I heard her that time. Cyan brought Kivaza's tails up behind her back and tied the ends to where they connected at the spine. Now that we have that under control, Cyan chuckled. Let's all have a talk. Cyan led Kivaza over to the bed. The fur was dense and soft. Lay down and get comfortable, Cyan smiled. I'll follow you into your meeting place as soon as I can. That reminds me. Why did you visualize me like that? Do you really see me as a prey animal? No, Kivaza blushed, I see you as someone worth pursuing. Cyanide laid Kivaza back on the bedding and rested her hand in the center of her chest. Kivaza placed her hands on top of Cyan's, closed her eyes, and focused on the warmth of her partner's hand as she slowly descended into the depths of the mind she shared with Kayla. Well, this is unexpected, Cyan said as she stepped into the mindscape. Water flowed in a ring around a vast tree stump. Kayla and Kivaza were sitting on a round stone bench with a gentle fire between them. A vast nebula could be seen in the sky above. This isn't right, Kayla said. It feels a bit weird, Kivaza agreed. Neither of them had tails. Nice fire, Cyan chuckled. It's not supposed to be there, but it looks cozy. Do you mind if I join you? It's your party, Kivaza said as she waved her over. What's the point of this, Kayla sneered, and where are we? With the exception of the fire and bench, Cyan said. This is right out of one of my memories. It's a bit nostalgic, actually. Thank you for letting me paint your world. Kivaza smiled broadly. I think it was more that you settled an argument we were having. Over that Terran? His name is Shinji, Kayla snarled. Just listen, Cyan said as she stepped over the bench across from the duo and sat down. I don't care what you have to say, Kayla insisted. I want Shinji, and I don't care what you think or want. Kivaza sighed heavily and glared at Kayla. I really don't care about that, Cyan said calmly. Was that fantasy I saw in the boy's head not your doing? It was, Kayla blushed, then momentarily looked panicked. I meant to say it was. I mean, I did put it in his head. What am I saying? I'm using an ability that's natural to all Lamentics. We call it soul touch. Is that the funny warmth? Kivaza asked. Cyan nodded. Yes, and you can't lie to me while I'm using it on you, not even inside your own head. Nice trick, Kivaza admitted. Cyan shrugged. I want you, Kayla grumbled softly. You can't lie. Kivaza burst out laughing. I bet she can, Kayla said as she motioned to Cyan. I'm more experienced with this, so yes, I could. I just don't see the point. I want you to be my Tejmare and partner. Starting with lies would be pointless. Trust is. You two are a package deal. If I want one, I have to accept both. I'm willing to do that, even if I do have a preference. Kayla glared at Kivaza. You just want to be pleasured, Cyan observed. She wants Actually, what do you really want, Kivaza? Kivaza looked down in embarrassment. Princess? Kivaza blushed. What do you mean, princess? Kayla scoffed. She's not the only one who interacted with that timeline while Thalu was removing the PRI hardware from our head. That explains it, Cyan said. I just thought you two were strong enough to resist the command at the mall. I was wondering how you did that. Why are you both glaring at me? Didn't you read the message cylinder? We couldn't read the language properly, Kayla said angrily. Then why were you at the proposed meeting place? We thought it was a good place to meet with Gaurun, Kivaza said with a shrug. We expected him to come looking for us. He can't go anywhere without the approval of that Chalig, Cyan said with a whimsical expression. So, you honestly had no idea you were supposed to meet me there? Wait, you never got Aisha's warning about the real attack? Well, I guess that explains why you were there so early. I didn't expect you to show up until after I had finished my workout. Don't get me wrong, I'm not complaining. What was the warning? PRI is after your patient number. Aisha knew their attempt would fail, but couldn't see why. Korbajani authorized them to send in some people to acquire you. I intercepted the message a little over a month ago. It included a contract with some really strange requirements and conditions, so I brought it to Aisha's attention. What kinds of strange things? Kayla asked. High court orders. I can't discuss it. We're in a mindscape, who'll ever know? Kivaza asked. Sorry, can't tell either of you. Seeing as you thought we had Corin, Kayla said slowly, I'm guessing it has something to do with a biological object that was on the ship. No, it's not Corin, Kivaza assured Cyan. If he wants it, we should destroy it, Kayla insisted. Cyan looked back and forth between them in confusion. What if they find it? Kivaza said on the verge of panic. Find what? Cyan asked. We can't tell you, Kayla said nervously. It's incredibly dangerous, Kayla and Kivaza said in unison. You can trust me, Cyanide insisted. No, Kivaza said softly. We can't trust anyone with this. We should have destroyed it already. We just didn't. If they search the shuttle, Kayla said nervously. I'm completely lost, Cyan grumbled. I hope this isn't some ploy to get me to share classified information. It's not, Kayla insisted. Can I help? Cyan offered. Kivaza said, I'm going to tell her what she needs to know, nothing more, agreed. Just be cautious, Kayla insisted. The last captain of the ship we arrived in was named Thalu, Kivaza explained slowly. She's the one that removed the PRI hardware from my head, but she found something else while she was in there. We won't tell you what it is, Kayla said firmly. Kivaza continued. What I can tell you is that Korbajani had ordered Thalu to surgically remove the alien gland from my brainstem, without damaging it. Luckily, he doesn't know what it is. Is this something you need put back? Cyan asked. No, Kivaza and Kayla said in unison. It regrew after we consumed a changeling mutation core. Cyan bobbed her head slowly. That must be the explanation of how you got tails without it being an augment. Do you know what it is? Yes, Kivaza said nervously. Just don't ask us to tell you, Kayla insisted. Okay, but where did it come from? Cloning, Kivaza said, as Kayla said Farpoint. That's great news, Cyan said happily. If you were cloned at Farpoint, there should be another copy of your original body there. The machine always makes 2 copies. I know how to perform soul transference rituals. I've overseen a few. Kayla, if you want, I can contact Aisha. Once I get her approval, I can bring you there and conduct the ritual so you can both have your own bodies. Really? Kevasa asked excitedly. No, Kayla said sternly, that's not an option. Why not? Cyan asked. I've already been to Farpoint. When I saw it, I just lost it. You lost your spare clone? Cyan asked. Why did you hide that memory from me? Kevasa asked angrily. I sort of shot it, Kayla said nervously. More than once. Kayla shifted uneasily as Kevasa and Cyan glared at her. The gun kept clicking after it ran out of bullets, Kayla said while smiling sheepishly. I didn't understand why I did it at the time. I just did it. Looking back, I don't think I had a choice. I mean, did you stop to think what would happen if there were more of us? Kevasa cocked an eyebrow and asked, What us are you talking about? There are already 2 other queens. The one that made us, and the one that tried to kill us. I think we'll actually have to kill them both. Why would the Cletharian queen make another queen if? I don't know, Kayla wailed. Stop talking, Cyan yelled. Now. They both fell silent, suddenly realizing what they'd just revealed. Where is it stored? Cyan asked forcefully. A cold storage locker on the shuttle. Kevasa said swiftly. Is it secure? The container has an unlocking code. Good, Cyan sighed with relief. At dawn, we'll head to the port. I'll go with you to get that container from your shuttle and destroy the contents. Why should we? Kayla began. I trust her, Kevasa said sternly. Really? Kayla asked in surprise. Yes, Kevasa said adamantly. We can't lie, remember. If anyone tries to get in the way or gets that box, we'll kill them and destroy its contents. Agreed? Cyan asked. Agreed, Kayla and Kevasa said in unison. Okay, now that that's settled, Cyan said, you were saying something about your pet. Shinji, Kayla said irritably. Fine, Cyan teased. I already told you what I want. I know you want to frolic with your pet, Shinji. I really don't care about that. It's just sex, and you share a body with my chosen Tejmare. Cyan took a deep breath before continuing. Understand this, Kayla, if they found a male suitable for the program, it wouldn't matter if I found him to be repugnant. I would be culturally required to accept him, allow him to penetrate my body, and bear his children as frequently as is required by my caste. I have no choice in the matter. I must spread my legs at their whim. It's simply my duty, but it's just sex. Cyan shrugged, then continued. You, on the other hand, can do whoever and whatever you want. Kevasa is part of you and has as little choice in the matter as I do. Kayla sat silently, in extreme emotional turmoil. This is what I ask of both of you, Cyan pleaded. When Kevasa is with me, bear whatever witness you must, but do not interfere. In exchange, I hope Kevasa will be willing to provide you the same courtesy. Just as I have my duty to my caste, you have a duty to one another. Cyanide stood and walked to the border of the mindscape. Those are my terms, Cyan said as she took a deep shuddering breath. Kevasa and Kayla sat in silence watching her. Without turning to face them she asked, Kevasa, you never answered, what do you want? I could make a list, Kevasa sighed. Did I make it on the list? Cyan asked as she hesitated before stepping out of the mindscape. I want to be your Tejmare for tomorrow, Kevasa answered nervously. I'll give you all the tomorrows we can manage, Cyan said as she stepped out of the mindscape. Are we okay now? Kevasa asked while studying Kayla. Things were so much easier when it was just the 2 of us, Kayla complained. I know, Kevasa soothed, the more people we let into our life, the more complicated things are going to get between us. As for Starlight, I know you want her too, so why were you fighting me? She chose you. She has accepted both of us. I'm just worried about Shinji. About that, Kivaza said cautiously. Do you really want him, or are you just getting addicted to the feeling of his desire? Go. You know she's waiting for you. Kivaza studied Kayla for a moment. Just let me know when you know the answer. I will, Kayla said, but Kivaza had already left. Kivaza slowly opened her eyes. She was nestled into the folds of the lush fur of Cyan's bedding. While it had been referred to as a rug, calling it a blanket would have been more accurate. The leather on the opposite side of the fur was soft, flexible, and silky. The creature must have been quite large when it had lived. This clearly wasn't some animal bred in captivity for the harvesting of its fur. She was 17 feet from head to haunch, Cyan said from elsewhere in the room. I got lucky with that one. One of my contacts bagged the poacher that took her down. It was a clean kill. They were after her liver or something like that. I forget the details. I really only cared about the hide. I paid to have it treated and cured. My contact kept the tail. So, I couldn't get my hands on that. It cost me a fortune to have it imported. What is and isn't legal to own isn't much of a factor when you're a resident of Blade's Edge or an official representative of the court. Kivaza ran her hands through the lush fur and snuggled into it as she listened. That reminds me, Cyan continued, I want to get your contact information before you slip out of my fingers. I didn't notice you drop a tablet into my cache earlier. What do you use to keep connected? You're not wearing any jewelry, no bracelet, earring, or pendant, so I'm guessing you have one of the implanted communication devices. I don't remember ever having one, but I do have a tablet on the nightshade. It's hooked into the navigation system. We'll need to get you a proper interstellar comm device to track contacts and keep in touch with the people that are important to you. Oh, what's the name of your ship? Nightshade? A hunter-killer's class frigate, not bad, but Nightshade is a model, not a name. I don't think the ship has a name. The last captain died, so I can't ask her. Just rename it when you get it registered under your name, Cyan said dismissively as she rummaged through a container near the generator. I think I have a couple old ICD rigs over here, if you're interested. They're only encrypted for point-to-point, but you can have them hacked to cover other contacts easy enough. Are they just for tracking contacts? That and messaging. It doesn't take much to link one with an ID chip. Oh, I found them. Your options are limited and they're older models. But they'll do the trick for now, until you can get your own. Why do you have extras just lying around? I've gone through plenty of defenders over the years, so I keep the nicer ICDs when they die. It's a waste to just toss them. If it'll save me some hassle, I'm okay with a used one, Kivaza said with a shrug. Broken. Cracked. Unsanitary. Not great, but it'll work for now. Sorry, all I have is a MindWire interface. Not ideal, but you're psionic, so it's at least usable, Cyan said apologetically. What? MindWire. It's a headband that converts messages to telepathic input. They're a great defense against cyberpaths, but not as secure when dealing with telepaths. With PRI gunning for you, not a great choice. It might be worth a run to a store later, but as for the base ICD unit. Necklace or earring? Cyan asked. Kivaza considered for a moment then answered, necklace. Cyan held up a pendant on a braided metal chain. Not a bad choice, actually. Just give me a couple seconds to get it ready to pair with your ID chip, and I'll be right over. Kivaza was enjoying watching her naked companion walking and bending and reaching and... What's that on your back? A scar? I guess I thought you weren't allowed to have scars, and why didn't I notice until now? I didn't feel like wasting energy from my backup stone to recast the cover-up spell. It really doesn't have much in it, and after what we discussed, I was hoping you could accept it. It's not exactly a normal scar. There wasn't a hint of nervousness in Cyan's voice. What is it then? It's my leech hollow. Kivaza watched her in confusion. Every Lamentic keeps their leech somewhere on their body. It pushes chemicals into our bloodstream: serotonin, dopamine, norepinephrine. My people don't produce much of any of those naturally. We produce glutamate and oxytocin just fine, but as for the rest, that's where the symbiont comes in. The leech serves more purposes than just making soul stones. There are some fundamental differences between Lamentic and Terran physiology. We may look similar, but there's no shared ancestry between us. But you can interbreed with Shamfarians, Kivaza said in confusion. Not all Shamfarians, Cyan shrugged. Only ones with key markers from something called a Denisovan, I think, but beyond that you'd have to ask someone that's studied beyond our basic curriculum. I've forgotten more on the topic than I remember, honestly, but that question does come up from time to. I'm probably boring you to death. No, it's interesting, but I wanted to know about that scar. Oh, sure, Cyan said. As leeches go, mine is actually kind of short. They can be up to 18 inches long. When you first bond with a leech, it will come to rest somewhere on your body. For me, it was along the top of my spine, from the bottom of my neck to just below my shoulder blades. When I'm done here, I'll head over there and let you see the marks for yourself. It bites down and eventually burrows in about 1/4 to a 1/2 inch, depending on how big the leech is. It also has these. I don't know. Tendrils? That work their way into your flesh. When it's actually on my back, it flattens out and you barely notice it. But when it's not there, you could almost use those little holes as a handhold. It bothers some people, but I think you're better than that. What were you looking for over there before we got sidetracked? Kivaza asked. Cyan ran her hand through her hair and paused before answering. Honestly, I don't remember. Let me just enter my contact info in there and then we can pair it with contact information. That's why I was here. I saw it earlier. Cyan reached into a crate near the generator and pulled out a small handheld device. Relay, she said. Without it, I can't send messages outside of the cavern. I was going to check in with my defender and see how things went with your escort. The device beeped. I've been meaning to ask if I can just call you Kiv for short. Kiv means sister. Is that a problem? Kivaza giggled. I'll be back, I'm going to go have sex with sister. Most Lamentics would just ask which sister if they cared enough to bother. Keep in mind, I'm related to several of the noble houses. Do you know the difference between a royal line and a family tree? Kivaza was pretty sure she knew the answer, but asked just the same. What? Trees have branches, Cyan giggled merrily. What houses? Kivaza asked, knowing the answer was unlikely to mean much to her. Cyan took a deep breath before answering. My name is Cyanide Etargoran Hyzera Kilanorwal Olmatin. Okay, I'm confused, Kivaza said. Saul was an Etar, but his son, my brother, Vance, was a Goran. How does that work? I'm pretty sure Saul's proper name is Sali Targoran Naskali, but don't quote me on that. I'm not sure if he was inducted into House Naskali after the birth of the daughter he had with Phoebe Naskali. He has a daughter? Not anymore, Cyan noted. There's a childhood illness that takes the lives of a lot of our infants before the end of their first year. That's part of why I doubt they let him maintain any connection to their house. This is getting really complicated. Don't worry, Cyan laughed. I don't expect you to remember any of it. Kivaza breathed an exaggerated sigh of relief. Cyan's relay beeped again. She held 2 fingers to her temple. The escort of Lady Darkseid will be sleeping at the Shadow Brigade barracks until proper sleeping accommodations have been arranged. Kivaza watched Cyan in amusement. I think that should cover it. I'll enter his contact information into the ICD for you, Kiv. Kivaza tilted her head from side to side. Don't like it, Cyan asked as she maneuvered her way past the boxes and wiring on the floor. Not really. How about Veshti, in honor of Veshtaka? Definite no, Kivaza said. Her nose wrinkled as if she was smelling something foul. There has to be something else I can call you, other than Lady Darkseid. Why not just call me by my name? Kivaza asked. It's an old name with lots of history. Even more than Lady Darkseid. If the wrong people made that connection, it would be like drawing a target on your own head. You need a pseudonym. Until then, I need something to call you that's safe. Call me crazy, but I prefer my lovers to be alive, and seeing as I can't afford to buy you a soul catcher. What? It's a choker with a red stone in the middle. When the person wearing it dies, their souls are absorbed into the stone so they can be transferred into a new body, usually a clone. They can only be used once, and they're insanely expensive. Stop worrying about what to call me. Strictly speaking, we're not lovers, yet. Good point, Cyan grinned. We should probably do something about that. Kivaza spread her arms. Yes, please. Cyan took 3 swift steps and launched herself into Kivaza's waiting arms.